Why Hashulhalti Pi Shingshil Piachia. My name is John Chenoweth, and I work at the Nicola Valley Institute of Technology as the Associate Vice President, Academic and Community Education. Before Christmas, I was asked if I could say a few words about the intersection of international education and Indigenization. And I thought, that would be really interesting to discuss, given my research interests in international exploits as a younger Canadian. My research interests are in Indigenous education, and my goal in life is to continually work to improve the quality of life of Indigenous people. And as a member of the Okanagan Nation and the Upper Nicola Indian Band, I know firsthand we got a lot of work to do, and that's why we always need allies and advocates, no matter what realm or part of the education system you work in. Now, I understand that the audience I'm speaking to this morning is particularly interested in international education. And I'd like to say, a long time ago, when I was in high school, I think I delved into the world of international ed as an au pair in France. And I was a nanny. I was there for 8.5 months, looking after a couple little kids named Augustin and Agnès. And I played rugby. I went to French language school. I was 18 years old, a Canadian, a British Columbian, a First Nations, an Okanagan Nation member, and a member of the Upper Nicola Indian Band. Living in France in a suburban Parisian family's home that were middle class, and honestly didn't know much about Indigenous people in Canada other than what they've seen in movies or read in magazines, and probably all of it not the construct of Indigenous people. So as an international student at 18, I didn't give too much reflection on what does that mean to be an Indigenous person on that trip, until later on in life when I start looking at my own children, the education system, what we're trying to achieve in the world of education. When we start thinking about, what does international education mean to Indigenous people today? And what could be done to indigenize international education today? Couple interesting questions. If we think about, I'll give you one from my own work. I work at the Nicola Valley Institute of Technology. It's an Indigenous mandated post-secondary school. We partner with about 35 to 50 communities a year around the province and deliver training within the community. And in BC, we're such a diverse Indigenous population. We're working with groups from the northeast, northwest, right down to the south, southeast and southwest, and the island, central coast. But one community in particular I want to share with you is up in Morristown. We're doing some work with the Wet'suwet'en community there, and a couple of years ago they said don't offer any training between this date and this date, and it was about a month, and we were like, okay, maybe there's something locally culturally relevant that they, maybe they're gathering food or hunting camps or what have you. We didn't even ask because we get that all the time. So it turns out upon going to their graduation that a group of adult ed students actually raised funds and went to Belize. I learned that they went down there, made connections with the local Indigenous tribes, and brought their students down to do some volunteer work and serve within their community on projects that they could have. Was it interculturalization? Absolutely, because you got the Wet'suwet'en culture going headlong into a Yucatan, South Yucatan, Belize culture of Indigenous people. Did it look like an amazing trip? Absolutely. I'm sure that the students from Morristown will not forget that trip. Was it an Indigenous inspired trip? Absolutely. And why did they undertake that trip is something that I was noggling in the back of my head. So I talked with their administrator. And they said, well, as Wet'suwet'en people, they wanted to share who they were, but also learn about other cultures from around the world. And in a nutshell, they're doing international education in a way that reflects Indigenous values and beliefs, and also the value and belief that we want to share who we are as people from this land and show it in a good way. I know that in a case like that, we have Indigenous communities doing international ed under the radar of the system. And by the system, I mean the public system. And so when we think about the BCCIE and what it could do to indigenize and what can it do to support the indigenization of our international efforts in the K-12 and in post-secondary, I think we come across a few concepts that we must consider. Number one, we ask how many Indigenous students partake in international experiences, and we don't know that because it's not tracked, and the province would be better off if it shared that crucial information with the BCCIE. And why? Well, if international education as a goal is to showcase British Columbia's education system, it's a wonderful education system and its people with the world, that's an Indigenous concept. It speaks to an ever-expanding circle of belonging that we all fit within, and we all have a responsibility to continually work toward balance and beauty within our communities and to share that with the world. If we go out into the world, our role is to continually spreading balance and beauty. And we all have a responsibility to do that within the Indigenous community and within education, and particularly within international education. So I would like to state that international ed is probably one of the most set up functions within our system to promote indigeneity and to promote that sense of belonging with the world, an ever expanding circle of belonging, of which we are all a part of and have a responsibility to build balance and beauty. Now, it's a coffee series, and I'm hoping I'm sparking a little bit of thought within your mind, but I want to leave you with a couple thoughts. Number one, if you work in the K-12 or post-secondary world in international education, ask yourself this: what can I do to promote British Columbia's Indigenous population? What can I do to promote Bill 41 that really looks at UNDRIP, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and the Truth and Reconciliation Report? What's my role as a British Columbian to make myself aware of those documents and how they will impact my role in promoting the values of British Columbia to the world? That's a really neat question, and I hope you ponder it, and I hope you travel and push kids out. I mean, let's get as many kids as possible out of this country to see the world. And when those people come from other parts of the world to come to British Columbia, let's show them who we are, starting with our core, and that's the Indigenous people. With that, have a great day. Thank you very much for listening.